Welcome, everybody. I have here today with me Jeffrey Strauss, the Senior Manager of Information Technology Operations at Tinder. Jeffrey, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Good morning, and thank you for having me. Again, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Yeah, so like you said, Senior Manager of Information Technology Operations. I've been with Tinder for just over 2.5 years now. It's a great company. The company is growing. The team, as is the story in IT, never grows as fast as the rest of the company. So I'm very lucky to be a part of a team that's a very, very highly performant, has a lot of varied skill sets. The job is great. The company is great. We deal with a lot of challenging issues, as any startup does. We have a huge user base to support. Thankfully, a lot of people have heard of the app, so the general use is sort of known, and the sort of scale that we support is known. So it's a great challenge to work in that kind of environment. We support IT operations supports every organization and company rather every organization and team in the company. So we work with everybody from from our executives, the C-suite, all the way to literally the front desk security personnel in the building, all the way up and down. So it's a great company. I'm very, very thankful to be there.
Wow, it sounds quite intense and really quite the experience. How many users are you supporting approximately?
Internally, just over 300, I think, at this point. Spread out around the world. So we have our headquarters are here in West Hollywood, about 2 blocks from my apartment where I'm speaking to you now. So I have a great commute. We have another office, mostly engineering, in Palo Alto, California. And then we have distributed offices in Europe, a couple in Europe. We had one in Iceland. We have South Korea, Japan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're all over the place. Brazil.
Is that distributed? That must be some interesting challenges dealing with people spread out all over the globe, and time zones and team communication, collaboration. What's that like?
It can be tricky. So at this point, we do not have a formal follow the sun or sort of 24/7 support model. So we're a small team, all 5 of us, myself included. So really, we're sort of like, our phones are on and we're getting pinged, and we're just good about being responsive. So the nice thing about it is that we're a team of all senior engineers. So all of us are senior level engineers. And the nice thing about our team, and what I'm very, very thankful for my teammates for, is that despite the fact that we're all sort of like higher level engineers, so we're software engineers, audiovisual engineers, network engineers, all at the senior level, a lot of times at that level, those teammates can sort of fall into the, well, I'm not doing that sort of trap. Yeah. And it's like, we'll get the help desk engineer to do that. But luckily, the team meshes very well, and we all understand that we all have sort of we're all sort of rowing the boat in the same direction, is what I like to say. And so we all sort of get together and make it happen. So if one of us, doesn't respond to our Slack channel at 3 a.m., then another person will. And we're pretty good at it. And so there's not a lot of downtime. Now, it's not formal, which much to my chagrin, it's not formal, but that's part of my job as a manager, is actually formalizing that process. And so it's in the works right now, but it's a little bit tricky with the team size and sort of how we're operating. But that's something that's going to be coming down the pipeline, is a more formalized support model for our distributed employees.
Oh, awesome. We'll have to have you back later on to talk about how that works and what you implemented. I was actually under the impression that Tinder was a much larger company. Usually these tech startups, they scale and balloon in staff and size, and you've managed to, or not you necessarily, but the leaders have managed to keep the teams smaller and more really in what our audience companies are like. I work for a company also. My day job is I work for a real estate management and ownership and development company, and they've got about 400 employees. And I too have a team of 5. and we're all located in our Southern California office, except we have one tech on the ground in Vegas. And he's basically just your basic, go out to all the properties and fix all the problems kind of guy. So he's very all around. And one of the challenges that I've been actually wondering about, and maybe with your experience you can help answer this, is how do you deal with siloing? You have a team of 5. You've got, Lord knows, I'm sure you don't have enough time to do anything. Never mind stay above water and keep up with things. How do you deal with getting rid of siloing and having everybody kind of be able to work on everything across the board? So if 1 or 2 people are out, you still have those areas covered.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so I operate my management philosophy. I've developed a management philosophy over the last several years that I've been managing. And part of that philosophy is, and one I take very seriously, in fact, probably one of the most serious pieces of that philosophy is if somebody is out of the office on vacation or parental leave, or just because they're feeling overwhelmed and they need a day off, it is very important to me that that person not have work in the back of their minds, right? I say this, and this became even more evident to me after my now fiance took me on vacation last year. I hadn't had vacation in several years.
Put it down, huh?
What's that?
It made you put down the phone and the tablet.
I took 1 call while I was there. 1, I believe. Otherwise, the phone was out of sight, out of mind. And it was 5 days. And it was the most, I say to this day, it was the most relaxing vacation I've ever had. Not a single thing about work was in my mind the entire time. But that's because I'm part of a team that supports each other toward that goal, right? So that's something that's very important to me. I felt the benefit of going on a vacation and not thinking about work whatsoever and coming back completely refreshed and ready to rock and roll. If you're thinking about work while you're on vacation, it's nagging you in the back of your mind and something's keeping you up at night, you're not having a good vacation. You're basically worried about work and then you're not refreshed coming back. So that's a big thing for me. The way that we handle that internally is the following. We have a subject matter expert program that I started when I first got to the company. And that subject matter expert program works sort of like the following way. Actually, it works exactly like the following way. We meet as a team and identify areas of responsibility, right? So we have a service catalog with our critical services listed in it. Things like Slack, the network, audiovisual, Jira, Confluence, trying to think of some other, Gmail. And we essentially, we run very democratically, right? So, everybody talks about IT being sort of like this, everybody likes to use their sort of like little mascots. Like people have pirate ships and, have like stickers all over their computers, like little, we're like the pirate org or whatever. Actually, I sort of take that to heart. I have like a weird fascination with like the pirate life. And I like to think that we run our team sort of like a pirate ship, right? Where there's a captain, and the captain is basically providing, general overarching direction and clearing blockers for the rest of the crew to operate. But if the captain is not doing well on a real pirate ship, I didn't know this, but on a real pirate ship, the captain is democratically elected. And if the captain is not doing well, he can be voted out of being captain. And so I sort of take that to heart with my team. And I don't even like to say my team. I like to see our team. Uh-huh. But essentially what I'm getting at is we all sat together and we decided as a team who was going to be responsible for what components of our infrastructure, right? And that was a very democratic process. We sat together in a room. Almost everything we do is democratic. We did the same thing for our core values. I spoke about that at the Tab Geeks Micro. Our core values and our mission statement. We all sat together, and that was an exercise that we completed as a team over the course of several weeks. Similarly, for the subject matter expert program, we all sat down in a room over the course of several days, and we carved out who was going to be the SME, the subject matter expert for the particular technology. That subject matter expert is responsible for learning all they can and doing whatever it takes for them to be the highest point of escalation for that technology, whether it's sitting down and learning it every single day, taking certification courses, buying books, what have you. That person is the highest point of escalation, right? Mm-hmm. Then that person is responsible for creating and delivering training to the rest of the team. So part of the part of being the subject matter expert is that you are also responsible for making sure that the service doesn't stop running in your absence. That's part of your responsibility of the SME. And so that's worked very well for us. You know, one of the ways that we do that, you know, one of the things that I like to do, by the way, I might start rambling a little bit here, but one of the things I really like to do when I describe how we operate is giving like concrete steps to get there. It's really annoying to me when I listen to a seminar and someone's like, yeah, we have to make sure that, you know, the team cross trains everybody. Like, great. How did you do that? And so I like to describe how we did it. One of the ways, the major way that we do it is by documentation. I mean, you cannot overstate the importance of documentation. No documentation is better than bad documentation even. So if we don't have documentation, that's fine, because if we have outdated documentation or that has another problem with it, that's even worse than not having it at all. So a big thing for that SME is being responsible for the creation and maintenance of that documentation. And right before anybody goes on vacation, I have one of my teammates going on vacation. He's going to India for another colleague's wedding at some point toward the end of next month. He's responsible for a lot of critical infrastructure. And he's been going through documentation, making sure it's all up to date, because when he leaves, I don't want to bother him. He's going to be in India. So not only do I don't want to bother him, but, you know, it's his time off. I shouldn't have to bother him. But again, part of that is his responsibility. So that's how we sort of make it happen.
Interesting. Back to the pirate ship. I was just thinking, I'm getting a little echo there. I was just thinking with the pirate ship that you better hope nobody makes you walk the plank.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that's really some great advice. What's the number one skill that you would recommend for a small to mid-sized business IT professional to have?
Yeah, so I think the skills vary depending on the size, right? I think if you are a one-man shop, if you're the only person there, the biggest thing you could possibly do is observe your environment and make positively impactful changes or enhancements to your environment given your limitations, right? I talked a little bit about that at the presentation I gave a couple of weeks ago at Tab Geeks Micro, which was one of those points was go for low risk, big wins, right? Low risk, big impact. Things that are not extremely expensive, like, you know, changing out that 2-year-old TV in that conference room for a new 65-inch, 1080p, HD, UHD, all the acronym, whatever the TVs are now. Those are only a couple $100, right? That's a positive impact. It helps, it's very visible. It's low risk. You can switch out a TV and put a mount on the wall. It's a visible, tangible, and worthwhile enhancement to the environment, right? And it's not super duper technical. You buy a new TV and you put it up, but people see it and they're like, oh, this is a new TV. Oh, look how much sharper it is. Look how much crisper it is. The sound is so much better, whatever. It's a low risk, high visibility win. So I would say if you're like a one-man shop, like that's your wheelhouse. You're probably going to be lacking on budgetary resources. You're obviously lacking in manpower. Typically, if you're a one-man shop in an environment that's growing, you're going to remain a one-man shop as long as the company as long as they can push it, until you're starting to be like, look, I'm going to look for another job. You're going to be that one-man shop until they decide, okay, you're going to need a little bit of help. Once you start to grow a little bit and you show your value and you can provide the type of evidence to leadership that shows that another hire will just amplify the good work that you're doing, which is one of the reasons, by the way, I say look for those low risk but visible impact wins, because I mentioned the iceberg analogy. People only see the top 10%, but you're doing 90% and people don't notice it, right? I guess I didn't make that up. I thought I made that up. I didn't make it up. But that 10% is what people are going to think of in their minds, right? Unless one of the 90% pieces has a very tangible impact on the business, like improving your outbound speed, for example, right? Your outbound link to the network. If you're going from a 500 megabit connection to a 1 gig connection, that makes a very serious impact. It's very visible, right? But it might not be that cost effective. That's typically pretty expensive. And it's hard, especially in a small business, it's hard to quantify the benefit of doing that, right? So, or it can be. Anyway, back to my original point. As you scale up, once you provide evidence that another person just enhances your productivity because, hey, look how productive I've been. I'm making all these changes around here. If I had another person, I can get it done twice as fast. We can do twice the work, right? We can make much bigger changes. So once you start to scale up and provide that evidence and you get support, or you start to manage a bigger team, or you're part of a bigger team, however it happens, then I think the skills become a little bit different, right? It goes from observing what can be done in the environment and making those changes to participating in sort of like increasing skill set. Because once you start to work in a larger organization, the demands of the team will start to become greater, right? So working at a one-man shop, what's that?
Funny how that works.
Funny how that works, yeah. Working as a one-man shop, you might not have any sort of process in place for example, delivering equipment to a new hire, right? You might literally just buy a computer, set up an account, if that, and hand it to someone. Maybe slap an asset tag on it if that asset tag even does anything, or if you even have asset tags, right? Or a system to manage all of your assets. What's that? Yeah, spreadsheets, exactly, right? Yeah, so spreadsheets. So it goes from that sort of situation to a situation where now you might be managing a bigger team, you have more processes in place, maybe you have an asset management system that you're using. Regardless of what it is, I think your skill sets sort of have to change and have to grow with the organization. And once you start to get to a bigger organization, you'll see more requirements for IT to interact with different parts of the business in a much more deeper and sort of like more intertwined way, which is why I say once you get to a certain point, like you're working on a team of 3 or 4, an invaluable skill that will serve you no matter how big your team is, whether you're the one-man shop or you're working on a team that's a 100-man shop or you're managing a 100-man shop or whatever, learning sort of like an automation language. My preference is Python. I've been coding in Python for years and years. I would say that's probably the next step up, is not necessarily learning a particular system, but learning such a general and broadly applicable tool that you can use to integrate systems together. That's where I find like the real niche people. When we look for people, we look for people who have that skill set, because yeah, one of the things I always say is you might be able to find the perfect off the shelf solution, right? The perfect turnkey solution. Or you might find a solution that has 80% of what you need, but not quite 100% because it doesn't have an integration into X, Y, and Z that we're using, right? Build that integration. Like that's where that really comes in handy. So I think depending on the size, but smaller size, I think observing your environment, seeing what changes you can make. Once you grow bigger, like learning that tool to help you integrate different tools together and really customize the environment. That's where a lot of value comes. Obviously, those aren't the only 2 things, but those are 2 big ones for me.
Yeah, those are definitely huge. And I would agree on the automation standpoint. We had, since over this past summer at my day job that I mentioned before, the real estate place, we actually had an intern who was a software engineer, and he was getting a degree in computer science, but his real enthusiasm was around coding and solving problems through code. And I had this dream for quite some time of, we have a G Suite, we're big G Suite users, and we use a lot of it, but there's a lot of information out in the company that isn't making it into G Suite. And also because we have a lot of people moving around a lot of that information is constantly changing. And I had this, one night trying to fall asleep and my brain's too busy working hard. And I had this dream of, oh, it would be wonderful if I could just say, okay, when HR or when the manager moves somebody, all of their information will automatically update everywhere else. And we were able to build that because he came in, and I believe he built it in Java, not Python, but nobody's perfect. I'll have him give you a call so he can switch. But he built a system that was able to integrate with a visual directory which was called Office Space software, I believe. And he was able to integrate from there that when they would actually move somebody, it would update that person's signature, the information in their signature, such as their address, website, phone number, extension, etc., and would email the appropriate people to let them know this person has moved from here to here. And none of that would have been possible without that level of integration. And now we're taking it a step further, where we're automating team drive permissions based on their location. You're at this remote property now, boom, you have access to all of their stuff instantly as soon as the transfer goes through.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. You know, these companies provide application programming interfaces so that you can do exactly what you need to do, because they're not in the business of building the solution for every company, right? They're in the business of building their product, and companies like their product and need their product to work the way they want. And so that's why they do that. And interestingly, about G Suite, we're also a Google shop. One of the guys on my team, Rob Oligui, just recently, a couple months ago, open sourced a tool called a Python library called geauthLib. You can find it on GitHub. And we started working heavily. I mean, you know, when I got there, we were doing there's a little bit of automation in place, but I didn't have the time. I come from a software engineering background where I was just doing automation. And I didn't have the time to do it, especially once the company started growing around me. And so Rob came in, and to his credit, didn't code a line of Python, maybe a line of Python when he got there. This is another one of my management philosophies is the resume building side, right? So it's not just the work that you need to do to get your job done here, but do the work that you want to do that helps you build your resume in the future, right? And so one of those things, which you want to get more into the coding side, is the software development side. So he started learning Python, and one of my other philosophies is making sure that I hate going home, and my fiance hates it as well, I'm sure, coming home and having to read like technical manuals. Like I hate coming home and like opening up an RTFM, right? I hate it. I would rather come home and spend time with my fiance, with my dog, hang out, have dinner together, watch our TV shows, and I don't want to like be on the computer working. So I can if I can avoid it, I will.
So when do you do that training? When do you learn new things?
At work. So what we do is I'll tell my team to block out hours of time during the day, and we will pick up the slack for them. So we'll pick up their tickets. We'll handle the walk-ups. They can schedule a couple of hours a day during work, whatever works for them. Like I'm not going to let it, you can't schedule like an 8-hour day for 5 days a week, unfortunately. But if you want to take an hour or two during the day while you're at work, learn that tool. The tool is for work. I'm not going to expect you to do it when you go home on your personal time. Do it when you're at work. If you want to do it at home, you totally can. But I will make the time available for you at the office so that you can learn those skills, because they will directly transfer to our work at the office. But anywho, my point being that Rob came in not knowing any Python. Fast forward, it's been here for maybe like a year and a half or so. I get that timeline wrong, but fast forward, and he is doing almost all of the automation. We now have a CS degree on our team now. His name is Nice. He's fantastic. So he's doing a lot of the automation as well. But Rob did all this automation for G Suite. Ended up, we started using this tool that was open sourced by another author called GAM is what it was called, right? And I think that's the G Suite, like the G Suite name for the automation that they provide, or something like that.
I don't know if it's provided by Google specifically, but it's the most popular one that's used for doing tasks via command line.
Right, but via command line. And so Rob started using that, and it was really for our purposes really very limited. And so Rob just was like, we can make this a lot better. And he did, and he open sourced it. And now geauthLib, is this Python library that he continues to contribute to, that has so much more capability than GAM does, and we use it internally, and it's been fantastic. But again, to your point, companies provide that capability so that other companies can leverage their tools the way that they need. And one of the things that we look for, one of our criteria for bringing a turnkey solution into the company is, does it have APIs? Right? Are there APIs exposed for us to use? What are they? Yeah, because we have to see them. The last thing I want to do is purchase a new tool and then start manually working in that tool when we have automated workflows for everything else. So,
Right.
yeah.
Now, for your tool that you guys open source, do you need to know Python to use it, or is it just commands that you can use in command line?
No, you can use some. There's some that you can use in the command line, but it's a library, so it's built to include in your other Python projects. So if you have Python projects, you can leverage the library to do Google API, do tasks in Google via the API. So it's not like a full-fledged, like, here, let me click this button and do this. That capability does exist, obviously, but it's more of a library for you to import into your projects, so that you can leverage all the functionality that Rob built into it.
That's great. And I actually have, you mentioned doing training on the job, and at work, I have my help desk admin actually doing Google's IT administrator course that they put out on Coursera, because he's fairly new to this and he has some experience with it, but he's missing a lot of the bigger picture why this kind of thing works. And he can Google, like, as well as the best of us, which is in itself a very valuable skill. Most people can't do that necessarily, but he's missing a lot of the, okay, well, yeah, I know I plug in the network, but then what happens? Why? And so that's, at least I'm hoping, I did a little bit of the course myself to kind of see how comprehensive it was. And it seems very well-rounded. So that's another approach that maybe people can take if they're in the beginning of their careers and they're trying to get a leg up. Are there any other things that you would recommend for someone who's just starting out?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and so I have a lot of sort of angles to attack this. But if someone is starting out and they have, like, the only experience they have is like, hey, I bought a computer and I took it apart and I put it back together, or I fix my grandmother's printer problem when she has one.
I was growing up.
That's right. That's what we all did growing up, right? That's why I think a lot of us ended up in this field. If that's your experience now, I would, in terms of building your skill set, I would first try to identify what it is you want to do, right? A lot of times when people are starting off and they're like, well, I want to get into IT because, I fixed this computer, or I did, I wrote this, a calculator or a game on my computer or whatever. Sorry if you can hear the church bells chiming right behind me. There's like a church right behind our apartment. But one thing is, IT, and this is something that I mentioned at the Tab Geeks event, is a lot of people get into a very narrow mindset about what IT is, right? IT is not just help desk. Help desk is a facet of IT, but IT is a much broader field than just break fix, right? So you're talking about DevOps, you're talking about enterprise resource planning, you're talking about your IT, your traditional IT teams. Could be networking, could be sysadmin, it could be a whole bunch of things. So the first thing is determine what it is interests you about the field, right? If, truth be told, unless you're at a really big company that's sort of like doing their own hardware thing, focusing on the break fix component is not going to take you very far in the field, right? Being a help desk engineer, I'm being completely frank. If you're happy being break fix and that fulfills you, then there's nothing else you need to do, right? Do what you love, love what you do. That's perfectly fine. If you're looking to get higher and higher level in the industry, in terms of like breaking into management or getting into something a lot more technical, like the continuous delivery side or what have you, software engineering or whatever it might be, you're going to need to expand the skill set a little bit beyond the break fix thing. So the first thing would be determine what it is that really interests you about the field. If you like your sort of hands-on stuff, then that's great. You might want to focus on like hardware engineering. And there are big companies out there that do their own hardware and have hardware engineering teams that you can join. So that's one, right?
More of that these days also.
You're seeing more and more of it, yeah. Especially at the really, really big companies, you're seeing more and more modularized.
IBM, they've all got their own hardware, their own servers. And now they're, with the advent of the virtual assistants and whatnot, they're all building their own companion to your lives, whether it's at home or at work. And those things are going to start hitting the office space as well in I don't know, the next year or so. Amazon already has announced plans for Alexa for work.
Yeah, it's a fascinating field to be in. And you also think about it at a much higher level, like what the cloud is. And the cloud are just huge, just data centers running, in some cases, customized, custom built and custom manufactured hardware. Not like we're going to build a custom box with a motherboard from here and a processor from here and a this from there. You're talking about like from the ground up, these things have been custom designed. So there is that, right? We're talking like fast forward 10 years, right? Because you might have to have an electrical engineering degree for some of those things. But if you sort of wanted to go the alternate route, which is very popular in IT, which is not necessarily finishing a degree or starting one, just having to be good at sort of methodical problem solving and sort of identifying breakpoints and sort of, you know, future, like forecasting where things are going. You know, and you want to enhance your skill set and have the break fix be a part of your skill set, then I would start to focus on what it is that you're actually doing when you're doing what you're doing, and seeing how you can extrapolate that into the bigger picture. And I'll give you a very specific example of that weird phrase I just said. So when you are break fixing, right? Like let's say you have a broken printer, right? And you're trying to fix it. What is it that you're actually doing when you're going through the process of fixing that printer, right? You're not necessarily, there is the component of like, let me open up the flatbed and let me see if there's a paper jam and take it out or whatever. But really what you're doing is you're going through a methodical problem solving process. You are going through a process of solving this problem. You're checking here first. Why? Because in the grand scheme of things, when you're thinking about a printer, what happens first? Like paper is fed through the thing, or even before that, data is sent to the printer over the network, right? So like you're going through this methodical series to solve this one problem, right? So you are methodically problem solving. Take that particular thing that you're doing and you're just applying, and you apply that to everything else. You apply that same skill set to fixing a screen on a laptop, fixing, you know, an XYZ, whatever. Now, what can you do as you build that particular skill set, right? Well, you can apply that to someone has a software project that they need done. I need X, Y, and Z done. All right, how do I go through that and methodically problem solve that? What skill does that require, right? So if you're going to do a break fix on a printer, the skill is relatively low for break fixing a printer, right? You can go online, you can see sort of a manual, you can sort of open up things, see where things fall, sort of understand how a printer works. And like, all right, well, maybe if the data didn't get sent to it or the job looks paused on your computer or whatever, like there are a couple of components, but the skill that it takes to resolve that problem is relatively low compared to some of the other tasks that you could be applying that skill set toward, the problem solving skill set toward. Like for example, when someone comes and says, hey, we need to integrate our tool with Google, right? That's a much higher skill set, but you apply the same problem solving method to that as you would to fixing a printer. And so when I say like, understand what it is you're doing and how you can apply that to a broader problem, a bigger problem, or a more complex problem, really what it comes down to is observing your own behavior and extrapolating that and seeing how that can play into something else. I do the same thing in my day-to-day management. I'm not very hands-on technical anymore, much to my chagrin, but I still leverage the same methodical problem solving whenever I'm presented with a new challenge or a new task. I do it every single day. We all do it every single day. And so that's what I mean. Like if you want to find an angle to get, more advanced, skilled in this field, really what it comes down to is finding the area that you want to focus on, be it hardware, be it software, be it enterprise resource planning, be it whatever, and really focus on the problems that need to be solved in your particular environment and then start attacking those problems, right? I'll give you one quick other example is we use Jira and Confluence. We don't have a certified Jira administrator on the team, but one of the guys on the team, Edwin, is killing it at Jira, killing it. I mean, he's just like, oh yeah, automating everything, working with tons of different teams to make sure Jira is working the way that it needs to work. He came in without any idea of what even Jira was. Never saw it before in his life. Huh?
And he just owned it.
Owned it. He owned it. And he was like, yeah, this is, he's a computer science major, came in doing some automation stuff. He was working with Rob on automating some of the Google stuff and building some of our internal tools that we use. And then he was just like, you know what, this Jira stuff is really interesting. And just boom, shifted his skills to Jira. And he's been killing it. And he's doing the Jira certified systems or Jira certified admin exam, the Atlassian exam, doing it at work. And it's just been great. But another example of coming in with one skill set and just applying that skill set to something else, it just takes an individual's observation to be able to do that. And building that observation skill will serve you no matter what it is you do in your whole life. Like observing where things can improve, having that sort of continuous improvement mindset, how I can adjust my skill set to attack that problem. I mean, if you have that kind of mindset, then you're going to do well no matter what it is you do.
Absolutely. And those are the people to look for, the real ones that are really, into it and interested, enthusiastic, and willing to learn. That's how you get ahead, is just keep attacking, keep building, keep learning.
Yep. Like I said in the Tab Geeks presentation that I gave, we hire for our AA candidates, right? We hire for attitude and aptitude. And that's really true. If you have the aptitude, which includes the desire to learn new skills, that's something that you cannot put a price on that. And those are the candidates that we really like push through.
Yeah, great. You mentioned a couple of tools, and this is the last thing I want to ask. We'll wrap up. What are some of your favorite tools to use, both personally and with your team, that make you, that save you time and are very helpful, and just really just the best stuff out there?
Yeah, well, professionally, I mean, we use Slack. You're going to hear this. I mean, I suspect you'll hear many similar answers with these big sort of like, cross-functional collaboration tools. So, G Suite, Slack, your normal sort of like collaboration tools professionally.
Modern companies anyway. The more modern companies anyway. I'm still fighting for some collaboration efforts at the real estate company. Most of the people have the mindset of, I have Outlook, and I have Microsoft Word, and I have Microsoft Excel, and anything else.
If you guys are using Google, then you've got like GChat, stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? But regardless of what it is you're using, same with us, right? We have to be able to collaborate with all of our distributed employees. And so we use like those as well. I mean, for me, obviously the phone, I have an Android, I have a Pixel. I like my Pixel. I'm doing this on a Lenovo. What is this? An X1 Yoga an X1 Yoga ThinkPad, because I love it because I'm running Fedora on it. I can flip it inside out and it becomes a tablet, and it works great because I'm now in my management position. I'm in charge of building out offices, so it's great to like see blueprints on, do markups on, like that kind of stuff.
I didn't realize Fedora had tablet support. That's cool.
What's that?
I didn't realize Fedora had tablet support. I'm gonna have to try that.
Fedora is phenomenal. I went through like 3 other distributions. I've actually really come to really like Fedora. It wasn't my first distribution that I tried on this laptop, but once I installed it, everything worked out of the box. It was unbelievable. Wow. Everything worked out of the box. I mean, screen flipping, tablet, stylus support, all of the function keys, everything just worked. It was phenomenal. So I've really come to like Fedora a lot. Yeah, so I use those, and then other sort of, I'm really simple, like if it wasn't clear by some of the, like my management philosophies, like leaving work and then not doing work if I can avoid it, I try to stay off of technology as much as I can, to be quite honest with you. I mean, much to my fiance's chagrin, I'm on Instagram a lot, and so I do that on my phone. But in terms of tools themselves, I mean, I've got a couple YubiKeys for 2-factor auth, which I really like. I've got, my ThinkPad, which I use for everything, my phone, and I'm trying to think like, there's some like some project management software that exists on Fedora. And again, I'm not going to be like saying sort of like more widely known tools, because I don't do a lot of stuff that's, if it's cloud-based and we're doing project management, then we use Jira internally at the office. But for me personally, if I'm sort of like tracking my own finances or tracking my budget or whatever, I really don't use cloud-based tools. Like I don't use Mint. I don't use the budgeting software that my credit union has. I have tools on my box here. Plan is a great project management tool for Fedora. But I feel like that's not going to be applicable to a lot of people, because a lot of people aren't running Fedora on their computers.
Linux users out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I got some project management stuff. I got some like personal budgeting stuff for me. Chrome works fine for everything else. And I got my phone, and I got, a couple other tools here and there, little knickknacks and gadgets.
Oh, that's the best. Do you, you mentioned using less tech at home. Are you into the whole smart home craze and the virtual assistants and whatnot?
Not, I got to be honest with you. I'm probably like, I don't know what people are going to think about me as a human being in this field now that I'm like, no, you know what? I did have probably up until about 6 or 7 months ago, or maybe a little bit longer than that. I had like a couple of servers at home running on the Intel NUCs, like the next unit of computing, whatever, those like little teeny tiny boxes. I had a couple of servers running on those. I had a really big custom built huge machine, like extremely powerful, water cooled, 32 gigs of RAM. I was going to use it with my brother. My brother and I were roommates at our last place, and we were going to use it for this. We're both cyclists, and we're going to use it for like this VR cycling software where we would put our bikes onto these electronic trainers, these bike trainers, and they would connect to this VR system that you could virtually race other people live around the world through all kinds of crazy terrain. And that was the computer I built to support that. But my brother and I ended up never doing it. And so I would use it for just testing and whatnot. And it was just like sitting behind my TV on this credenza in the living room. And it just wasn't being used for anything. Cause when I come home, I'm trying to like, the one thing is that now I'm senior management and I'm not that hands-on tech anymore. And so my day-to-day focus has changed. And while tech is still very interesting to me and I enjoy it and I still program on my own, like I'm still writing tools on my own, for like my own purposes. It's not something that I generally engage in anymore for work. And so a lot of the tools that I was using, I just don't have the time to do them anymore because I'm focused on other things, right? I'm focused on management. I'm starting to do more talks like this. I'm focused on writing a book. So I'm like in the middle of writing a book right now. Yeah. So on like my management philosophies. So
love it when you've got a copy.
Yeah, I will let you know. So I'm focused on that stuff right now, and that sort of takes me away. Plus, I'm getting like I'm older, like I'm not like a spring chicken anymore. I have can you believe it? I walked out of the bathroom this morning and I was trimming my beard, and I messed up with the clipper, and I like clipped the thing off here, and I was like, I got to do the whole thing now. So I came out like baby faced, and my fiance does not like it, and so, but now my point being, I have like this thing now. I've got a family. I'm starting to cultivate with my fiance, and I don't want to spend time when I come home if I can avoid it on all this technology stuff. I enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but with it all over the place, it's just like a little. I need to like step back. That's why I don't have social media. I'm on Instagram, so you can follow me on Instagram. No Twitter, no Facebook. I have my LinkedIn, but that's pretty much it. And I just find myself happier spending time with human beings outside of the office. And I'm not constantly looking at my phone. I'm not constantly like, what update, who liked, how many liked this? Do I have to post something interesting? Nobody cares about what I'm posting on Instagram. I rarely do it. I'm there to consume memes like everybody else. Yeah. And that's basically my life. As I come home, I try to just keep it real simple. I go train, I do my jujitsu, I go train, I come home, I'm cool.
Well, that's one of the things that is really important to remember is it's not always all about the tech. It's about the balance, and you'll be better at your job and a happier person overall if you can find that balance. Personally, I'm still working on it. I've got my iPhone, and it's never out of arm's reach, and I'm on every social network. I was on Yo for a while until that didn't go anywhere, and I think I try to because I also do a little bit of marketing stuff, obviously for Tab. And so I try to test out all the new networks, but I also make sure that we have time off, and we eat, we watch our TV shows, as you mentioned, and that's it. That's the only way to stay sane in this industry, because if you don't, it will eat you alive.
Yeah, it does, and that's why people burn out. And I'll say this because I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I will say this: like, it's hard. It's a hard balance to strike to stay good and abreast is a better word. It's hard to stay abreast of trends in this industry if you're disconnecting from technology. It can be difficult, right? Because when you're browsing Instagram or you're on Facebook or you're on the latest social network or you're reading the latest tech article or whatever, there are ideas that spring from that, right? And so it can be a tricky balance to come home and be like, you know what, I've got a bunch of these books, these technical manuals or whatever, or like I got a magazine in the mail and I want to or usually from a vendor, and I want to read through it or whatever. It can be hard to disconnect, but my whole game is like, if I'm gonna come home and I want to disconnect, then I'm gonna like read something physical, right? Like I'm gonna read a magazine, and that way, my fiance and I can spend time on the couch together, and it's an activity where she's reading her book, I'm doing this thing, I'm not like in a screen, you know what I mean? But it's true. It can be difficult to maintain a finger on the pulse of the industry if you're disconnecting from it. But work-life balance is tremendously important. And that's why I tell my team, like, if you're going to be out of the office, you don't have to work on your certification if you don't want to. I can make time for you to do it while you're in the office. Because when you're at home, I place a very, very high importance on being present with my loved ones, right? And if I'm on vacation, same deal. Like, I'm not trying to think about work in the back of my head all day because it's just making for a miserable experience. So that's a very, very big one to me, is that work-life balance. But again, that just makes work while you're at work that much more intense, because you do need to stay on top of those trends. You do have to sort of understand where the industry is going and sort of see almost like what's coming down the pipeline in terms of general trends. But it's not impossible. You can take it from me. I'm a perfect living example that it's not impossible to have like a work-life balance, or a pretty good one. And that's not perfect always, but it's pretty good. Okay. And still maintain like a very highly performant environment and team, and be highly performant yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I've actually been thinking about doing a newsletter from Tab Geeks. I don't think it would be daily. I don't have that kind of bandwidth yet. Yeah. But, even just weekly to start as a kind of recap of the last week's top stories. Is that something that you think would be useful?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I was thinking about this today. I was telling Rachel, that's my fiance. I was telling Rachel this morning. I was watching an interview this morning on management, and I thought it was a fine listen. It was like an hour long, and it was fine. But one of the things that really bothers me about a lot of these interviews that are going around about people in tech or managing teams or building teams or whatnot, is that there's a lot of theory and not a lot of like how do I get there, right? It's great to know what these people are doing, but if you're not at that level, then there is no hope for you to do that in a lot of cases, right? Like, I was listening to somebody talk about managing like multiple teams and the things that they're doing to scale those teams, but that has zero relevance to the 1 or 2 man shop, right? So they're like, oh, that's great to hear. When am I going to use that? I don't know. So that's why I'm always big on, first of all, I was a high school teacher, so I'm like extremely verbose. Like, I talk a lot.
What haven't you done?
Say again?
What haven't you done?
I know. I've had a very storied history, but so I like to like explain a lot. Rachel thinks I'm pedantic, and so does my team. So I tell my team, like, whenever I'm being pedantic, you can tell me to shut up, and I'll just cut it off. But one of the things that that's very important to me is giving functional, stepwise approaches to being able to reach a certain point. Hence my example before, where it's like, if you're the 1 man shop and you want to build a skill, that skill is observe what you have in your environment so that you can make low risk, high impact changes, right? That's like a very tangible step that you can take, in my opinion. Absolutely. I say that because one of the things I really like about Tab Geeks is that that's the focus. It's very, very helpful. I was 100% pleased with the Tab Geeks Micro event. I thought it was phenomenal. Every speaker was relevant. It was really a great event. And so I think, short answer to your question, yes, I think a newsletter would be very helpful, because I already know the type of content that you provide. And it's not like, some of it is, it's high level, but it's not like this sort of unreachable, unattainable goal that is all theory and no practice, right? It's like tangible steps given by real people in your environment, in your situations, and that's where I think is the most helpful. I think it would definitely be very well received, and I would love to receive it myself.
Okay, great, yeah, and real people that aren't getting paid to do it, that aren't getting paid to speak. That's our one of our key points there.
And you know what? That's another thing. I remember speaking with Todd from Snapchat at the Tab Geeks Micro, and he mentioned explicitly to you, I remember I was standing there, he was like, it's nice to come and talk or be a participant at an event where it's not a sales pitch, right? These people aren't trying to sell you stuff. They're just trying to help you with stuff. And that's huge.
Look at that. I got 2 testimonials out of you.
Look at that.
All right. That's a wrap. I guess we're out.
All right, Jesse. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure.